stupid dog. Ooga booga booga!
It's the 90s. You're watching your favorite show on Cartoon Network, and suddenly you're interrupted by a scared little pink dog who seems to be a magnet for all things creepy. Yes, we're talking about Courage the Cowardly Dog. The irony in the title of the show is enough to turn heads, and when you combine it with a homely old lady, a grumpy old man, and a talking computer that's far more intelligent than real-life AI, you get a masterpiece. Today, we'll dissect the past and present of this iconic show. Let's get started. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Origins. From parody pilot to cult phenomenon. Once upon a time in a land far away, and we mean really far away, with literally nothing else in sight, lived Courage, a cowardly pink dog. And it all started with a wild idea by John R. Dilworth in the 1990s. Even though this show became a cult phenomenon on Cartoon Network, it wasn't the plan. Initially, Courage the Cowardly Dog was developed as a 7-minute animation titled The Chicken from Outer Space. So, what was the premise of this short? An anxious Courage, living on a remote farm, encounters a villainous chicken from space who lays mutant eggs. This animated short was, of course, sponsored by Cartoon Network, and Dilworth worked together with Hanna-Barbera to breathe life into the animation. The protagonist of the show, Courage, was inspired by another character that Dilworth had created earlier, named Hamilton, who was featured in a pilot of the show Smart Talk with Raisin on MTV. However, it wasn't until the Space Chicken short that the network and Dilworth himself realized that it had something special to offer. This short premiered in 1996 with a single dialogue from Courage and immediately struck a chord with the audience, critics, and creators alike. When Courage the Cowardly Dog finally premiered on Cartoon Network in November 1999, it felt like something completely out of the box. It was creepy, it was hilarious, and it even had some heartfelt moments with Courage, despite being anxious, trying his best to defend Muriel. The audience instantly fell in love with them. Yes, even with grumpy old Eustace. The show was brave, so the production decided to be brave with sound design as well, and rejected any stock sound effects. Instead, they leaned towards custom-made sound, and finalized only those that made Dilworth laugh. The sound composition for the show even had bits and pieces of classical music. There was everything to love about the show. Courage's nervous energy, a whimsical world, quirky characters, kids got their creepy monsters while adults got a thematic depth. So no wonder the show even garnered appreciation from renowned critics like Luke John G., Netley's of Pot Matters, Alex Mastas of Lights Out Films, Randy Miller of DVD Talk, and Jeff Swindoll of Monsters and Critics. In 2000, the show won an Annie, and in the following year, it won a Golden Reel Award for Best Sound Editing. In short, this cult classic was born from a bold little pilot, grew through passionate creative risk-taking, and stayed beloved because it dared to be weird. The cartoon show that secretly was a horror show. Like we mentioned earlier, Courage the Cowardly Dog was nothing like the cartoons the audience had experienced previously. While it did take the guise of a goofy kid's cartoon, it was far from it. On the surface, it was just about a scared little dog, living with his unsuspecting and almost oblivious owners in the middle of nowhere. Pun alert, the place was actually called Nowhere. But every single episode was a parade of horrifying nightmares, with mostly extraterrestrial threats dropping in to terrify them. But it wasn't some lighthearted kids' horror. The show, with every episode, leaned into its horror theme with everything it had. From jump scare moments to unsettling visuals, it left no horror trope unturned. KJ Del Antonia of Common Sense Media, in fact, warned the parents in a review of the show's graphic violence, showcasing growing extra limbs, exploding organs, and more. The episodes weren't just spooky, they were twisted enough to give even adults nightmares. The storytelling is almost dreamlike, but the visuals are absolutely grotesque. The show's horror tropes took inspiration directly from horror movies as well. The episode Demon in a Mattress uses a possession trope similar to The Exorcist. King Ramses' Curse uses an ancient curse trope like The Mummy, and The Clutching Foot uses the body horror trope like The Fly or The Thing. Even Courage's backstory was quite tragic and horrific, being orphaned as a pup and constantly being abused by Eustace. Then there's the Monster of the Week format. Some classic horror anthologies like Are You Afraid of the Dark, The Twilight Zone, and Tales from the Crypt have relied on a format of throwing in a new monster or supernatural threat every episode to build suspense. Courage adopted that structure wholesale. Each week in Nowhere, some strange entity, be it a demonic mattress, undead pharaoh, alien chicken, or giant fungus, showed up and kept the audience hooked. WTF moments, nightmarish episodes, and unsettling villains. Now we interrupt this video to bring you some of the most nightmarish episodes and unsettling villains from the show. First off, there is the episode Freaky Fred, where Muriel's not-so-adorable nephew, Fred, visits them in Nowhere. Fred likes to rhyme. Fred likes to sing. But most of all, Fred likes to shave everything in sight with an uncanny grin on his face. His nursery rhyme monologues and eerie tales of his naughtiness can make anyone shiver. It's hands down one of the creepiest episodes, and fans agree. Moving on to another episode, A Night at the Cat's Motel, which solidified the dark tone of the cartoon. In this episode, our scared and adorable dog faces off with an evil cat. Due to a storm, the bags get stuck in the evil cat's motel. Cats unleashes a monstrous spider on Muriel, which he manages to flush down the toilet, only for Courage to be surrounded by dozens more in the basement. This episode was a true hell for those suffering from arachnophobia. Cats even pops up in some later episodes to torment Courage. Talking about spine-chilling episodes and unsettling villains, we absolutely can't miss King Ramses' curse. In this episode, the bags discover an ancient Egyptian relic, which was supposedly stolen from a pharaoh's tomb. Eustace, being the greedy old man he is, decided to keep the relic for himself and make a profit out of selling it. But when is everything so simple in Courage's world? The ghost of Ramses was not happy with Eustace's decision and urged him to return the relic to be free from the 3 curses that the relic had imposed on the bags. After quite a series of ordeals, from water flooding the bags' home to locust storm, Courage finally managed to free his family from the curse. Now imagine having the worst foot infection, the goriest kind. That's what the clutching foot was all about. It is certainly one of the most gross body horror scenes in any animated show. Eustace's foot gets infected and turns into a mob-inspired sentient and slimy fungus. This bright purple fungus oozing yucky green stuff starts to take over his entire body and demands help in robbing a bank. If we were making a list of the most disgusting episodes, this would definitely make it to the top. Now, it's one thing if bad things happen to Eustace. To be fair, he probably deserved some of that scare. But Muriel? Oh no. That's where we draw the line. Unfortunately, she wasn't spared either. In the episode, which pays homage to the 70s horror themes, The Demon in the Mattress, Muriel gets possessed by a haunted mattress. The show had more to offer, from terrifying puppet masters like the Great Fusili, who turns Muriel and Eustace into lifeless marionettes, to an unsettling entity in a porcelain mask who hates dogs. The show was stuffed with villains more horrifying than any live-action fiction. Thankfully, the show was also equal parts funny, so a generation was saved from childhood drama. Muriel and Eustace, the outlandish family at the heart of the weirdness. Courage the Cowardly Dog was indeed weird and scary, but what horror cartoon is ever complete without an even stranger family at its heart? Courage lived with Muriel and Eustace, a couple with polar opposite personalities living under the same roof. Muriel was gentle and kind, Eustace was as cold and cruel as it gets, and yet they had a functional marriage. How? Nobody knows. Not that this was the first time a couple was polar opposites, but at least Morticia and Gomez Addams had love and passion between them. Muriel was a sweet little Scottish lady in a floral dress offering homemade pie and tea to everyone. There might have been a chance that the pie had questionable ingredients, but her intentions were never questionable. And the most important of all, she loved Courage like her own child. So much so that she was willing to risk her life to protect Courage from a tree spirit. She never seemed to be fazed by the bizarre horrors creeping into her home. Then there's Eustace, bald, grumpy, and the perpetually annoyed husband. His hobbies included relaxing in his recliner and yelling "stupid dog" at Courage. Unlike Muriel, Eustace wasn't Courage's safe place. Eustace was almost sadistic, taking pleasure in tormenting the poor pup with his antics, like putting on a terrifying green mask. If it were up to Eustace, Courage would be thrown out of the house. However, Eustace's mean-spirited antics raised the stakes for Courage, like when they had to face the wrath of Ramses just because Eustace refused to give up his precious relic. To sum up Eustace's personality, he was greedy, irritated, and selfish. This cruel behavior might be the result of negligent upbringing by his mother, with whom he has a strained relationship. But behold, behold, if you look close enough, you might just find a little flicker of warmth in Eustace as well, like in the episode of The Mask where he willingly helped Courage. Somehow, this combination of Muriel's kindness and Eustace's cruelty made Courage's adventures worth watching. Behind the cancellation. Why did Courage end? Courage the Cowardly Dog indeed became very popular among other adventurous stories of Cartoon Network, like Scooby-Doo. So, needless to say, the show had its run for quite some time after 1999, till 2002 to be precise. Between 1999 and 2002, the show aired 4 seasons with 13 episodes each, after which, the show was suddenly cancelled. The reason for the cancellation, however, has not been corroborated to date. The primary reason is speculated to the huge number of complaints against the show for the negative impact it was having on kids. As we mentioned earlier, Courage may be a cartoon, but the visuals and tropes of the show were never suitable for kids. The children loved the show. It gave them an adrenaline rush, but the parents had strong objections. They believed the scary imagery and the unsettling content with mature themes, graphic violence, and whatnot was traumatizing their children and giving them nightmares. Apart from being violent, parents also flagged the show for having too much sexual content along with drugs, smoking, and drinking. Some parents have even come out and said that it was one of the worst cartoon influences for their kids, to the extent that the kids started to feel unsafe in their own homes. Even though this negative traction for the show is just one Google search away, it was never confirmed if this was the actual reason behind the show's cancellation. Others also speculate that the creator of the show, Dilworth, was responsible for the cancellation. Dilworth apparently has stopped writing more stories to continue the episodes since he had moved on to other interesting projects. This is entirely plausible, as it is not uncommon for creators to feel stuck with the monotony of a show after a few years. Unfortunately, this is also just an assumption. It's not all bad news though. If you love this show, you can still find all of the episodes on YouTube or OTT. But the question is, will you let the kids watch it? Misfit for kids TV, censorship, parental outrage, and bans. We know the show ruffled feathers with the parents, so it all comes down to one question. Were the parents right, and was the show really inappropriate for kids? To start with, it did earn a global reputation for being too bizarre for kids. But like we mentioned earlier, the complaints are not official. There are also a lot of conjectures pertaining to bans, censorship, and episodes being pulled out. Some are true, some are not. The Scuba-Scuba-Doo was one of the real instances of an episode being pulled out by Adult Swim, but it was done so only recently after the plane crash in early 2025. The only reason for the episode being pulled was to show sensitivity towards the crash incident, and it had nothing to do with how inappropriate it was for kids. Moving on to one of the most controversial episodes, The Mask. In the episode, a subtle yet compassionate relationship was portrayed between a masked cat and Bunny, a rabbit. Audiences deemed them to be lovers, and parents became outraged, arguing that it promotes lesbianism. However, although the episode may have lesbian undertones, Cartoon Network never explicitly conveyed a romantic relationship between the two and kept it vague. Hence, technically, the allegations seem to be baseless. Despite that, there's no denying that it might have poked the social sensitivities of that era. Some fans even came up with a theory that The Mask was a banned episode since it was missing from streaming platforms like HBO Max. But the truth is, it's just streaming curation. These streaming platforms often choose episodes they feel are worth viewers' time and money, and sometimes also are faced with unintentional rights issues which prompts them to exclude certain episodes. The Nutcracker also did not make the cut, so there's no explicit ban on the episode as such. There were also rumors about the Spirit of Harvest Moon being a lost episode, but as it turned out, it's not. That episode is simply called The House of Discontent, which was episode 12 of season 2, still very much available to watch. In short, Courage the Cowardly Dog definitely waded into territory most kids' cartoons avoid, and that is why it landed on so many ban and censorship controversies. But not all controversies were just rumors. Certain episodes, like the Tower of Dr. Zalost and Scuba-Scuba-Doo, were briefly removed from rotation following the 9/11 attacks. In some countries, especially in Eastern Europe and Southeast Asia, even though the episodes weren't completely banned, they were dropped from the daytime children's slots. Moreover, when reruns of the show were run on Toonami and Boomerang in the late 2000s, Some grotesque parts of certain episodes and prolonged close-ups of graphic violence were removed. Real-life inspirations and urban legends behind the nightmare. There are many widely circulated legends and lore of the show, one of the most common of which is that a real-life elderly couple, the Pattersons, inspired the show. According to the legend, Margaret and William Patterson mysteriously vanished without a trace in 1957, leaving only their cat behind. This couple lives in a remote Kern Place neighborhood in Texas, and their house apparently resembles the house of Bags. Some say that even their personalities and temperament were similar to that of Muriel and Eustace, with Margaret being warm and kind and William being gruff. However, nothing definitive links this real-life incident to the creation of the cartoon. Similarity has also been drawn between the Bags house and the house located in Truth or Consequences, a city in New Mexico. This house, in a remote location in New Mexico, has been witness to something more sinister than what happens in the cartoon. As the legend goes, this house is linked to serial killer David Parker Ray, infamously known as the Toy Box Killer. The Toy Box Killer was sentenced to imprisonment for kidnapping, torturing, and murdering 3 children, and it is believed that the gruesome murders took place in this house. But wait, the resemblance goes far beyond just the house. David, while torturing his victims, used certain tactics, like gaining sympathy with sob stories, offering to help, and then disconnecting phone lines, faking stories to deceive homeowners, etc. These tactics are strikingly similar to the ones used by some of the villains in Courage the Cowardly Dog. Many fans view the town of Nowhere not just as a setting, but as a living character, a nexus of haunting paranormal activity. Think like a hotspot or purgatory for Lovecraftian or eldritch horrors that draws in cosmic oddities. Another fan theory suggests that the Nowhere might actually be a manifestation of Courage's fears, anxieties, and past trauma that is born out of his psyche. There's no concrete proof that Courage the Cowardly Dog is based on a real-life event or true crime. Yet, these urban legends and theories add a deliciously eerie layer to the show. How Courage used horror tropes for laughs. Courage the Cowardly Dog was brave from the beginning and did not shy away from using or riffing on some iconic horror moments. Then, how does it translate itself into a cartoon show for children? The answer is simple: by making spoofs or parodies out of those iconic moments. For example, let's talk about the episode The Demon in the Mattress. Yes, it uses a possession trope hugely inspired by The Exorcist, with Muriel turning her heads 360 degrees, voice distortions, and more. But the script is flipped halfway through, with Courage bopping around in cartoon panic, scaring off a possessed bed with, well, a frying pan. So the terrifying plot suddenly becomes goofy and funny. The show also drew inspiration from the 1960 movie Psycho, with silhouette shots, ominous music, and creeping dread. But again, these scenes get translated into funny with a weird puppet show and other cartoon gags pulled by Courage. A major strength of the show is its surreal visual mix. Stop motion, CGI, live action inserts, these are intense. At the same time, there's also Courage's exaggerated reactions, like screaming faces, flailing arms, and cartoon tumble. So whenever you start to feel the terror, the show counters it with humor. That doesn't mean the show played it safe visually. Not at all. It has all the Hitchcock vibe you need. After all, you don't just get slammed for being inappropriate for nothing. It's the surreal visual combined with maximalist cartoon energy that gave the show its comedic stance. You can be scared of a cannibal villain and serial killers, but can you really take the villain seriously when you find out the victims are just eggplants? Or how formidable is a villain really to scar your memories if they can be made happy with candy? That's what happens in Courage. The horror tropes are intentional, but when you turn them into parodies, it turns into something funny that doesn't necessarily need a PG-13 certification. Legacy, the show that changed animation. The show garnered a lot of backlash from parents, but at the same time, it also grabbed tons of accolades and recognition. After the first short, aka the pilot of the show, The Chicken from Outer Space, which premiered in 1996, it was nominated in the 68th Academy Awards for the Best Animated Short Film. Unfortunately, it did not win the award, but it won something bigger, a full-fledged show of its own. After the show started to run on Cartoon Network, Its production design was applauded, and an episode, A Night at the Cat's Motel, won an Annie Award for Outstanding Achievement in 2000. The sound design of the show received similar recognition as well. In 2001, the show grabbed a Golden Reel Award for Best Sound Editing for the episode Courage in the Big Stinkin' City. In the same year, some of its other episodes were nominated for the Golden Reel too. The show was awarded an A by Lights Out Films and was called a textured and fascinating mixture of horror and cartoon. The show ended after 4 seasons, but its legacy continued. Years later, in 2012, it ranked number 5 on the list of Best of Cartoon Network shows. It even made it to several recent lists of the best 90s cartoons to watch. Over the years, Courage has been cited as the inspiration for several other creators, like Dana Terrace, who made Disney's The Owl House, and Lee Unkrich, the director of Coco. Courage redefined animated horror comedy for an entire generation, so it shouldn't come as a shock that animators regard Courage as a part of their creative DNA. The show still continues to thrive in the memories of fans, and is constantly revived through fan art, memes, and nostalgic discussions on platforms like Reddit. Courage Today, Internet Revival, Memes, and Fan Theories. Now that it's almost time to wrap up, let's discuss why and how this show refuses to stay buried even after all these years. Recently, as of the 31st of July, the show was removed from HBO Max, most probably due to expired rights. Fans were understandably upset and felt like it was an attempt to erase their childhood memories. Thanks to YouTube for saving the day. But that's the beauty of the internet. When any show is pulled by a platform, the fandom just glorifies it harder. So even in 2025, after so many controversies, so many outrages, the internet is bursting with Courage content. If you scroll through social media under #CourageTheCowardlyDog memes, you'll find dozens of fan-made videos celebrating everything from Courage's terrified squeals to iconic one-liners. There's no shortage of creativity when a show strikes a chord like this. The fandoms are bursting with fan theories, alternate fictions, and of course, fan art. Pinterest and Know Your Meme are packed with reaction images and meme templates. Think Courage screaming, the infamous Return the Slab, Eustace stubbornly refusing to leave his chair, even memes labeled Courage the Computer calling him a twit. So yeah, Courage is more alive than ever, and it's proof that this odd little pink dog never left our hearts. Marvelous verdict. There was so much wrong with Courage the Cowardly Dog, yet the show was just right. It was a deliberate blend of classic horror tropes and absurd slapstick comedy, which makes it extremely unique. Not many shows can give you chills and giggles at the same time, and this was one of those rare cases. But there was also a very important lesson hidden behind the horror comedy theme. The show teaches us that it's okay to be scared, but just being scared doesn't exempt you from facing the situation head on. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one, be safe, and thanks everyone.